Okay, thank you for being here. My name is Ben-Shaul, and today's topic I'm going to cover what happened to cause Operation Magic Carpet. Probably most of you heard about Operation Magic Carpet, and I grew up with this knowledge that my family came to Israel with Operation Magic Carpet, but I never asked myself what was the urgency to have this airlift. This is my aunt. Mazal. She passed away in January 19, and she's a trigger for my research. As a writer, I've always wanted to write fiction about Yemen, but this mission scared me because I knew it would take a lot of research, and it did. But when she died, it made me realize that I don't have much time. People are dying, and if I want to get the story, I better start on it. So she's the catalyst, and I dedicate this lecture to her memory. Okay, so in this lecture, we're going to cover four topics. One is the origins of the Jewish community in Yemen and their connection to Israel, the political reason in the 1940s that caused the refugee crisis in Yemen, the organizations and individuals who came to the rescue, the circumstances that led to Operation Magic Carpet, or also known on the wings of eagles, and I will explain why we have two names. But before we start, I want to give you a prologue just to get something that I realized that I needed. I knew nothing about Yemen aside from some anecdotal stories from my family. So when I did research, I really had to familiarize myself with the place, the history. So what do you know about Yemen? It has been on the news recently. Ah, okay. Houthis, right. Anything else? Yes?
Unique Jewish culture and delicious food.
Okay.
They have some Jewish kings, kings who adopted Judaism in
Right.
the Middle Ages.
Nice. Okay. This group knows better than I knew to begin with about Yemen. So this is a map. Yemen is here at the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula to the west. Oman is to the east. Saudi Arabia is here, and Israel is all the way here. And we have here India, and there is a reason why I mention India. Arabian Sea, Gulf of Aden, and here is Bab al-Mandab. Mandab, by the way, it means in Arabic lament, because the streams here cause lots of trouble to people crossing them, so they called it lament, a door of lament. And here's the Red Sea, and here's the Suez Canal leading to Mediterranean and Europe. So this is important, this route, and we'll get to it. There are 5 UNESCO sites in Yemen. We have the capital city of Sana'a. We have Shibam here in the Hadramaut area. We have Zabid to the west, and we have Marib to the east of Sana'a, and the island of Socotra, which is here, and we'll get to them. So Sana'a has been inhabited more than 2,500 years. They have houses there from before the 11th century. This is the capital. Does this remind you of something? How about gingerbread? Shibam, this is 16th century city, first one of the early urban development, and they have the first skyscrapers. Probably they call it the Manhattan or Chicago of the desert. And Zabid was the capital of Yemen from the 13th to 15th century, and it's known for famous Islamic university. And landmark of the ancient kingdom of Saba, also some people think it's Sheba, in Marib, that's east to Sana'a. That was from the first millennium to the 2nd century AD, very developed urban development, and they have man-made oases because of their sophisticated irrigation systems that they've developed. And the island of Socotra is UNESCO Natural World Heritage. Here we have the dragon blood tree. It's called blood tree because it has red sap. And here we have the rose, desert rose. I think it's called bottle tree. It can grow from rocks. Another fascinating site in Yemen, this is in Aden, in the city of Aden. It's called the tanks. The British discovered it in the 19th century. It's a system of 53 water-off tanks that during the pre-Islamic kingdom of Haimar, they created those to collect the water and provide water to the city during the year. So the British managed to recover about 12 tanks, and they made it also a touristic area site. So unfortunately, it hasn't been well maintained during the war. And Haimar, the kingdom, it was, you mentioned that Jewish kings. So that was the Jewish kingdom that was until pre-Islamic. I think it was until the 6th century AD. So there was, in the past, Yemen was a Jewish country, kingdom. Another architectural marvel is Dar al-Hajar, which was the summer palace of the Imam, who was a king of Yemen. This is outside of Sana'a, was built in a Jewish neighborhood outside of Sana'a. It's 7 stories built on a rock overlooking the Wadi. It was built around the 1920s. And probably was built over an older building. Animals, not many people know, but they have baboons and dolphins in Yemen. Agriculture at 4,000 miles high elevation, there is feet elevation. They grow coffee. Yemen is very known for its coffee. And they have gat or cat or jats that the Yemenis are addicted to. It's illegal here, it's narcotic, but in Israel, every Yemeni garden has a plant, at least one of this.
And it's an opiate?
Sort of, I don't know, but it's legal in Israel. I grew up with this. It's bitter. I didn't find it any interesting, but some people are addicted. You usually see them with puffed cheek, that they chew all day. Okay, so the second prologue is about the British Yemen, that not many people know about this history. So British controlled South Yemen between 1839 until 67 when they left. It started with Aden expedition. So just like now with the Houthis causing trouble to boats in Bab el-Mandab, there were always troubles with pirates in this section. So the British, remember I showed you India, they were controlling India. They needed to have a safe passage for the boats with products going from India to Europe. So they took over Aden. Aden was controlled, belonged to a kingdom that called Hashed, and the Sultan of Hashed resisted, so they had a war to take it over. But after that, more sultans joined the British government. They were excited to be part of this empire. And then this is the history of the evolution of the legality of Aden as part of Great Britain. It was first part of British India until 1932. Then it was Aden province until 1937. And this is the time Aden colony or protectorate. This is the time we're going to talk about between 37 to 63. Then from 63 to 67, they were preparing to leave, and that was a very violent time in India. I don't know if you've seen The Last Post, this BBC TV series about the last years of the British. It used to be on Netflix, but it's not there. The author, he was raised there, so it's about his memories about growing in during those violent times. This is the flag of Aden Protectorate. You have the Union Jack, and here's the Dow. The Dow, if I pronounce it correctly, is an traditional Arab sales boat. And this is the size, how much, this is all Yemen, all this, but they took more than half of it, the British, including Socotra, so you see how much they controlled. So they had 16 states, but the major of them were Lahej, the kingdom, and then the Kati, which is here. Kati is where, I don't know if you're familiar with Habani Jews. Have you heard of them? Habani Jews are from Kati, from this kingdom. So interestingly enough, and Yemenis in Israel don't even understand, the Adenese and Habanis keep on saying we're not Yemenis, and the other Yemenis said, "What is your issues? You are." But in a way, they are right. They were British subjects, so they were different from. My family is from North Yemen, so we are Yemeni.
So that's who controlled them?
Yes, the British. They were all British. There are so many ethnicities in Yemen, so even in the north, that's why they have war. Even among the Jews, they don't trust someone from a different area. Like my family is from Sha'ab, which is a region outside of Taiz, and they're suspicious of people from Sana'a or Damar or other region. That's the mindset of the old world. Okay. So this is the, I told you, Lahej is a big kingdom here. Dala is a smaller one. Kati is here, and you see other. But Lahej plays a major part in this story because they're just on the border bit from North Yemen. So lots of Jews cross the border through Lahej, and my family kept on telling me. They always mentioned Lahej, and I didn't understand until I did this research and realized what Lahej is. This is Ali. He was a sultan of Lahej in the 50s. He was named Sir for some reason. I couldn't find much information about him, but the photos I found, he looks like a British playboy. So his ancestor resisted the British, but he embraced it. And here is Khalib, I don't know, he's still alive, he's in England. He was the last Sultan of Kati. He was studying in England when his dad died suddenly. So when he was 19, he was the youngest sultan. He had to come back home. But he had only, it was in 66, he had only 1 year before he had to leave with his family when the communists took over. And then all the sultanates had to leave Yemen. It wasn't safe for them. So there are no more sultanates in Yemen anymore. His family, his ancestors were really pro-British. They admired his ancestor actually invited the British government to be part he wanted to join the British kingdom. He has a master's degree from Oxford. His son served in the British military. He has a daughter who's a lawyer, very highly educated Western family. Okay, so now we are going to look at a map of Aden. So this is a city of Aden. It's a little tiny peninsula. Steamer Point, this is the downtown where the government buildings were. We have Crater, it's a big old neighborhood. There's a big Jewish neighborhood here, so we'll mention it. Ma'ala is another downtown neighborhood. And here is Hormaksar. This is the airfield. It was the military units that control Aden was the Royal Air Force. So it was a military Air Force and also civilian Air Force. And further north, we'll get to it, but I just want you to have the visual. We have Sheikh Othman, which is a suburb of Aden. It's about 10 miles, 17 kilometer north of Aden. And here is, if you see this, so Aden has one of the biggest natural ports, if you see the structure of the land. So it's a natural port, make it easy for boats and plenty of room, and we'll see more footage of it. This is the Crescent Street in Steamer Point, or Tawahi in the Arabic name. Quite a popular site, so you see the stores here, and here across the street is Queen Victoria Gardens Park. It's called the Crescent because the shape of it, it's a shape of the crescent. We'll see more of it. And this is the statue of Queen Victoria that was uncovered in 1905. It's still there. It's across the street, and this was back then in the 30s, and this is today. I saw there are some bullet holes in this from the war in this statue. And this is a postcard of Aden in the 60s, I believe. So you see the crescent is here and the park, and here's a port. And here is the Crescent Hotel, which was built, I think, in the early 30s, fancy hotels that the Queen of England, when she visited Yemen in Aden in 54, she stayed there, but also all the Jewish emissaries, many of them stayed in this hotel. And this is another postcard of the hotel, and here it is, also not in a good shape, unfortunately, since the war. This is Crater, the downtown Crater. I don't know if necessarily this is the Jewish part, but it was a busy area, very developed. And now this is a steamer point from the sea. And this is today. And notice this Big Ben, I'll get to it. They have a mini Big Ben. This is Ma'ala. They had a boat factory that they made also dough, those boats. One of the governors says that he ordered his own dough made in this factory. Here's the yacht club, which was a bit north between Ma'ala and Homaxer. An old one from the beginning of the 19th century. They had regattas. I read that even women were competing in those regattas back then. There were some Arabs that they had some regattas for the dhows, traditional boats, but very popular. I mean, if you look at the Great Britain, they're an island. They're the nation of navy. So any place where they could enjoy the sea sports, they would develop it. This is a Big Ben that they also built. This is overlooking today. It's still there. And it was built, this is today here. This is a pier, still there. I read that it was built, the British built it in the 19th century, but I couldn't find the date. Now, here is Sheikh Othman. This is Aden, Sheikh Othman, you see Homaxer. And the refugee camps that I'm going to talk about is going to be here. So these are some photos. I think this is from the 30s. This is from the 50s or 60s. And in 54, the British opened British petroleum refineries there, that it caused economical boost in the whole area. Lots of people came for work, so they had lots of development, very modern area. And during the 50s, the port of Aden was the second busiest port in the world after New York. Thanks to this, because the Tim Hickenbotham, the governor back then, realized that they're sitting in a very good location of all the boats coming from India, stopping on the way before going to Europe, so they could sell them oil. So they developed it, and it was a very lucrative idea. And this is King George V, the Jewish boys' schools in Crater. It was built in 1911, very fancy building. And this is Benin, one of the wealthy leaders of the Jewish community in Aden, with Crown Prince Edward, that later became the king for a short time. So his meeting, that was in 22, I believe. And next to it, there is a Salim school that opened in 29. School for girls. It shut down in 66 when most of the Jewish community left Aden. So here we have schools in Aden under the British rule. It was fine to have schools. In North Yemen, it was illegal to have schools. The only legal school was a madrasa, which is religious schools for boys, that's all. Yeah, my aunt told me that my grandfather used to travel to Aden. He was amazed by the idea of having school for girls. If you want to know more about the Jewish community in Aden, there is a Aden Jewish Heritage Museum in Tel Aviv, but they have a website, a Facebook website. It's in Hebrew, but you can see photos and use Google Translate. Okay, now after you know where we are going to be in, let's get to the main subject. The origin of the Jewish community in Yemen and their connection to Israel. So you're probably familiar with these photos. Now, this one I want to pay your attention. You probably have seen several photos of people reading from all around the books. There weren't many books in Yemen, so they had to learn to read from different angles. So the Jewish community in Yemen is originally from the tribe of Judah. They were exiled in the 6th century when Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, destroyed Jerusalem and exiled them to Babylon, which is now Iraq. and here's a kingdom of Babylon. So this is Jerusalem. They moved here, and some tribes, some families kept on migrating to south. Thank you. My directions, I'm not very good with directions. Probably there's the one maybe that established the Haimar kingdom. And fast forward several centuries later and empires later, we have the Ottoman Empire. So Israel and Yemen joined the Ottoman Empire about the same time. So you see, here's Yemen, here's Israel. So during this time, Yemenis, because they were part of the same kingdom, they could migrate easily to move around the kingdom, so come to Israel. Now, just to talk about some restrictions that Jews in North Yemen, the Muslim area, had. They didn't have equal rights like the Jews in British Yemen. So they had to pay poll tax like all minorities. My grandfather had to, because he was wealthy, his job was to collect the poll tax from his community. And my family told me that he used to pay for the poor people who couldn't afford it. He paid for them without even asking. There was an orphan decree, which meant that if your parents die, you belong to the king, so you had to convert to Islam, and the Muslim community decided on your faith. That's why many Jewish families married their kids when they were young. So just in case as an insurance, if they die, they're not going to be converted to Islam. And then we have, they couldn't ride a camel or be higher than a Muslim. They couldn't carry a dagger. So daggers, it's still the Yemenis are walking. This is a honorable symbol of masculinity. The Jews in Yemen were not allowed to wear it. And in some places, they had to clean public bathrooms. But despite all this, it's not black and white. So like where my family lives, they had really good relationship with the Muslim neighbors. My grandfather was even connected to the Imam and his son, who was a governor in Taiz. So they told me that there was one new ruler in the region, and he asked to send some Jews to clean the public bathroom. And they told him, in our area, you treat Jews respectfully. So he had to learn new rules in this region. So the first big wave of Jewish immigration to Israel that was recorded was in 1881 to 82. Around the same time that the Bilu movement from Russia moved to Israel, that was the same time. So here are, you see Yemenis in Silwan or Kfar Ashiloach, Ma'ayan Ashiloach. They moved there. So again, this was a time where during the Ottoman Empire, so it was very easy for them to move. It was the same kingdom. Until 1948, before the establishment of Israeli state, 35,000 Yemenis were already in Israel. So they were 40% of the community. So, and I'll get to it, an interesting point. And here is the neighborhood that they built. So someone asked me last week, why did they emigrate at this time? I didn't know. I had to look, and my sister sent me this photo. Of course, it was easy because of the being part of the Ottoman Empire. There were also, one of the rabbis from Yemen wrote in his letters that there were rumors that Baron Rothschild bought some lands there for Jews, but it wasn't true, maybe in other areas. So at the beginning, they lived in caves in Silwan Valley, and then after a few years, they built their own homes there. So now it's part of West Jerusalem. It's a part of the Palestinian territory. It is East Jerusalem, yeah. There are still the homes, so there are some court cases of Jewish family, Yemeni family suing asking to have their homes. They probably had to evacuate it during the Independence War, and then Arabs took over it. But there are some homes that actually they're registered that they bought. They had the documents that they bought the land and built those homes. Subject the political reasons in the 1940s that caused the refugee crisis in Yemen. So here's the story. You can see that they could uninterruptedly moved to leave Yemen. Even though Yemen, north of Yemen, was a closed country, they had to get a permission from the imam to leave the country, and no one could enter without a permission. And I read in one book that the imam, his permission letters had a sprinkled red powder, so nobody could imitate it, so nobody could fake those documents entry. So they sent an email, the Jews in Yemen, North Yemen, sent an email, a letter to the imam asking for permission to leave, and he ignored it. He didn't reply. And then they sent it again, and he ignored it. So they accepted it as his looking the other way and they can leave. But the thing is, once they left North Yemen, they couldn't go back because they never had a letter from the imam to enter the country. So Yemenis kept on going all the time to Aden because there was a port to take a boat to go to Egypt, to go walking by foot through the desert to Israel. Nobody interrupted them, but something happened all of a sudden that they got stuck in Aden and couldn't go to Yemen. Why? And now we get to this. White paper.
Couldn't go to Israel.
Couldn't go to Israel, yes, sorry.
You said Yemen.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So after World War I, the geopolitical map is changing. Now, instead of the Ottoman Empire, we have other rulers. So the purple one is the British. So still you have Britain, Great Britain controlling Aden and Israel. So they still managed to go until the 1940s, go to Israel. But between 1936 to 9, there was a big Arab revolt led by the Mufti of Jerusalem, Haj Amin al-Husseini, that caused lots of bloodshed. And the British government had a committee to investigate how can we stop it and prevent it from happening. So Haj Amin al-Husseini was exiled from Israel. During the World War II, he spent it between Syria and Lebanon. After that, he moved to Egypt, where he died. And even during this time, when he was exiled, here he was meeting Hitler in 1941, and here is a Israeli newspaper summarizing this meeting that Hitler promised the Mufti will end this Jewish national house in Palestine. And another action they took was a white paper, which is a policy, a British government policy to Israel. And they decided to cap the Jewish immigration to Israel to 12,000 people a year for 5 years. And that was 1939 when World War II started. Not a good timing. And that's the result. And just to show you why it was so crucial, this is St. Louis boats that left with more than 900 German, mostly Jews. It arrived at the port of Miami and wouldn't let in because the Americans had capped all their refugees numbers or who can immigrate. They sent it back to Germany, and fourth of this passenger perished in the Holocaust. So very tragic. Just to remind us why it's so important to have a Jewish state. So it is always open to Jewish people if they need a home. Ben-Gurion, the leader of the Israel, was in a very tough conflict when the war started, just after the British published the white paper policy. Are we going to help them in the war, or are we going to fight them, to kick them because they are causing us trouble to bring Jews to the country? And just to remind you, the British got the mandate to Israel because of Balfour Declaration, and the idea was that the British are going to take over the land after the Israelis helped them with intelligence during World War I. That's a different big story. I'm not going to the details. But Ben-Gurion decided we will fight the white papers as if there is no war and fight the war as if there is no white paper. He had also another motive. He knew that he was going to establish a country and he will need a military. So it was a really great opportunity for him to have the people trained with the best military back then and then come back home with this military experience. So by the way, Chaim Weizmann, the president, he was there. He joined the military, the British military during World War II, and became a pilot.
As his son, I think, wasn't
Asa, sorry, yeah, Asa, no, he was his cousin, nephew. Yeah, sorry, but thank you for correcting me. So the result of the white paper policy on Jewish immigration from Yemen to Israel, until between 43 to 44, more than 4,000 Yemenis kept on immigrating, but from 44 until Israel was established, 48, zero. So in 44, as the Allies forces were releasing more territories from Nazi Germany, the world started realizing the disasters that happened in Europe. So the British government, as you mentioned, decided to prioritize Jews from Europe to enter the country and put a halt to the immigration from Yemen. So that's when Yemenis were stuck in Aden, not getting any entry visa to Israel. When World War II started, I think 38,000 people from Israel volunteered the British military, which was a huge amount of percentage from countries that was only 4,300 people. Among them, there were Yemenis there. There were also Yemenis who joined. In 41, I believe, or 40, in the spring, a group of, so they were mainly at the beginning the auxiliary military. A group of 1,500 soldiers from Israel fell into the hands of had to surrender in Greece, and they were taken as a prisoner of war in Europe for 4 years until the Allies released them. Some of them were Yemenis, and this is one of them, Nissim Gamliel, was Yemeni in Germany. And I'll get to my family story by the end also. So the other reason why there were so many refugees in Aden from North Yemen, there was famine in North Yemen. So Yemen never, even until now, never grew enough food to feed the people. It was always dependent on import of food from other countries. But during World War II, most of the countries, it was better business for them to sell food to the militaries. They got more money. So there was nobody to sell food to Yemen. So there was famine there. In Aden, on the other hand, it was a different area. They developed in 1940 the Abiyan. This is the Abiyan region. It's very agricultural, even now, rich soil. So they developed irrigation system and realized that they need, as the war started, that they need to provide their own food. This is a person who's behind it, Brian Hartley. He was the Aden director of agriculture between 38 and 54, and I found this in the book Aden by the governor of Aden. And all those books that I'm mentioning, I put it in my this lecture notes. So thanks to these guys, I had plenty of food. My grandfather, because he was rich and he traveled a lot to Aden on business, he brought a lot of food home. But my aunts told me that they remember all the hungry people knocking on their door asking for food and money, so they could provide it. So we have two reasons. So one, the white papers, no more, they don't let any more Jews enter, especially from Yemen. And then we have the famine in Yemen. People leave in North Yemen to Aden, get stuck, cannot go. And so we need help here. So now we're getting to the organizations and the individuals who came to the rescue. In 44, the British government in Aden contacted a Jewish organization in New York called JDC, American Jewish Joint Distribution. In Israel, we call it a joint. Until World War I, it was 3 different charity organizations in New York. But during the war, they got together under the umbrella of the JDC to help Jewish refugees in Europe. So they entered Aden in 44. And Rabbi Dr. Judah Leon Magnus, he was the founder of the JDC, and he also was a co-founder of the Hebrew University together with Chaim Weizmann and Albert Einstein. At the beginning, the JDC leased from the British government 2 old military camps on the border with Lachej, where on Lachej border with North Yemen. And this is Nurse Rachel Mashat, who was a Yemeni who lived in Israel, so they sent her because she spoke the language. And this is Dr. Ullman with her. So they started with 2 Fayoush and Masaben, 2 camps to help the refugees. But as the number was growing, in 46, they sent another doctor, Naftali Ben Baruch, and he negotiated with the British government in Sheikh Othman, remember the suburb of Aden? There was a prisoner of war camp that could host 1,000 people, could contain. So he leased it and opened it in 46. So that's a sign. And just a fun fact, the JDC sent nurse Rachel Mashat with him, and they got married through this adventure. So here comes the story. Actually, my novel that I started with this woman when she came to Aden. Dr. Olga Fikman-Feinberg was a Russian-born woman who moved to the US during World War I. She studied medicine and worked and she married Mr. Fikman. I couldn't find any information about who is this guy. She moved to Israel in 26, I think, and she lived. She was a good friend of Dr. Magnus. They're very humanitarian people. When she went to Israel, she visited a Palestinian family in Jericho, and their son was sick, and she realized that there was no doctors there. So she decided she opened a clinic. She was the only Jew and only doctor in Jericho for 10 years. She had diplomatic skills. There is a meeting photo of her on the rooftop of her clinic with King Abdallah of Jordan, the leader of the Palestinian community in Israel. So she was connected with the British government, with everyone. And but during the Arab revolt in 38, the Arabs set her house and the clinic on fire, and she barely managed to escape. She joined the British military and was stationed during the war in India as a doctor, military doctor in India. By the end of the war, on December 46, she was flying back home to Israel, and she had a layover of 24 hours in Aden. I believe Dr. Magnus asked her, he got reports of chaos in the camp, and he asked her to go and visit, see what's going on. She went there, and she saw how chaotic it was, and she decided to stay to help. So this is the JDC archive. I put a link on my notes there. So if I looked Magnus, Olga Feinberg to Magnus, I found 3 letters that he sent her. And this is the one cable that she sent him from Armando Nassim is one of the wealthy Jews in Aden that also helped. So this is one of the messages. That's from already February. Appalling social conditions, Yemenite refugees prepare to remain in Aden. And then there is another, that's also a few days later. On stay Aden any period you like. And here in March, she was shadowing with Dr. Elkanah, who runs a camp, ready to take over as a camp. That's a letter already. Now, I couldn't find any telegrams that Magnus sent her, but I believe because of the chaos in Aden, nothing was kept. Her telegrams arrived at an office and were filed. So the circumstances that led to Operation Magic Carpet, known also on the Wings of Eagles. By the way, Operation Magic Carpet is not original. There is another Operation Magic Carpet that the British military had to bring all the military personnel back home after World War II, and that started by 45. So we have lots of refugees coming. We still have the refugee camp, but still it wasn't enough. The camp could keep 1,000 people. There were a few thousand people. Some of them stayed in Aden with the Jewish community. Some lived in caves to survive. But still, I mean, why would Israel, while the operation started when Israel was during its independence war, what was the urgency? So here we have November 29th, the UN accepted the partition plan. So they split this what was British mandate Israel into two parts. The orange one is a Palestinian, the blue one is the Jewish one. Of course, Israelis, it wasn't ideal, but here is Ben Gurion celebrating. Here is dancing in the street. Israel accepted, just give us something. And here is the news the next morning announcing the decision. But the Arabs, of course, they didn't accept this decision, and they declared 3-day strike from December 2nd. Unfortunately, in Aden, it was the most bloodiest strike that they had from all the Arab world, and that was something that embarrassed the British government. Before the strikes, the British knew that it's going to be, could lead to violence. So they asked all the territories that they controlled to protect the Jewish communities. Something happened here under their nose that they weren't prepared to. This is the boys' school at the entry to Crater neighborhood that is on fire. So let's get to what happened. And here is a newspaper in the US announcing the riots that went out of control. And here are some photos.
A lot of people,
Yeah, 82 people were murdered. That was a large amount. So here's the story why it became so severe. The police was supposed to keep the order during the strike on December 2nd. The British police, yes. And by the end of the day, they contacted the governor and they said, we need to declare state of emergency to bring the military in because we cannot control it. The governor declared state of emergency, sent the Aden Protectorate Levy, 1,800 soldiers. Problem was, most of the soldiers, they were Arabs who identified with the looters, and they had guns and weapons. So they joined the looters, and it became bloody, very violent. So there were 2 Navy boats at the port, and they called help from the Navy commando. But the problem was the commando was not trained in crowd control. So then they called, in Egypt, there was a canal zone. They called for help for infantry forces that were trained in crowd control. So on December 5th, 18 airplanes of infantry soldiers came from the canal zone to Aden. By the next days, they took over, and these are the photos of the infantry from canal zones that came. But they managed to control it, yeah, but that was chaotic. But the damage was devastating for the community. And now the military, they protected the Hashed, the refugee camp in Sheikh Othman, and they also evacuated 900 Jews from Sheikh Othman to the camp. To protect them. Whoever insisted to remain was found dead later. They also evacuated wounded from Aden to the camp because it wasn't safe for them to be at the hospital in the city. So here's one woman doctor. I don't know how many thousands of people were in the camp. It was chaotic. I cannot imagine. Did you have a question? Oh. So this is a school after it was burned. Some houses ruined.
And the Jews lived in a particular neighborhood?
In Crater, mainly in Crater, but they were also in Sheikh Othman, they were also in Ma'ala neighborhood, some had in Steamer Point. Now, the British government wanted to compensate them, but they were very wealthy, and they realized that it was too expensive for the British government to compensate them. So the JDC sent an emissary, and I put a link to his memoir. His name was Leon Batensky. And also Harry Vitalis was the manager of the JDC to the Middle East. So he was also coming to visit all the time to see what's going on. So his memoir gave me some insights about the situation in Aden after the massacre. Now, another issue that caused more panic of more people living in North Yemen was the assassination of the imam. And he was, on February 17, he was assassinated in 48 in his car. And I have a funny story about this. But here's something interesting. In Al Jazeera, I had to find out what car he had for my story because I knew there weren't many cars in Yemen and I had to be accurate. So this is an article in Al Jazeera that the journalist went to visit the museum. The car is in a museum in Sana'a. And in the museum, they say that he was killed in November 11th, which is not, the known is he was in 17th of February. So one thing for the record, Yemenis are not good with dates. They don't write whenever people are born. My dad on his passport, his date of birth is 00, because I never wrote down his age. But then I was curious to verify, so then I found this book by Eva Hoek. She was a German doctor who worked in North Yemen. She was the doctor, Ahmed, the crown prince, invited her. He had a harem of women and no men could see them, so he needed a woman doctor to come. So she had inside information. So in her book, she mentioned that Ahmed told her the next day, actually, 18th, February 18th. So I realized that he was assassinated on February, not November, as Sana'a, the museum in Sana'a states. That's her book. Also, I put a name of the book in my notes. So here's the Jewish refugees in Aden. You see how it's growing. From 45, it was 1,500. The camp can only have 1,000, but by now it's overflowing. 3,000, 7, by 48 it was 7,000 refugees from North Yemen, and the Jewish community in Aden 6,000. And from this number now we have lots of refugees themselves because after the massacre. So we have a crisis, a really serious crisis that they need immediate help. So plans begins. Ben-Gurion declares the independence of Israel in 48. And of course, we have celebrations, but we're Jewish. I guess we are, maybe that's why we are, what I said, when you go from depression to happiness, not bipolar. No, it's, there is another name. I mean, life don't let us, I mean, we go from happiness the next day.
To the other.
Yeah, then war. So here is the newspaper announcing the establishment of Israel. And the next day, 5 Arab countries attack Israel. By the way, some people debate when the war started, because after the UN decision, Arabs started attacking, but that was within Palestine. On May 15, the Arab countries, there was Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and some troops from Lebanon and Saudi Arabia. What is?
Iraq.
Right, that's true, thank you. So during this war, 6,000 men and women were killed, which was 1% of the population in Israel. It's a huge number. So despite that, with this brutal, I mean, they didn't even have money for weapons. They knew that they had to help the Jews immediately to get them, even when they were at war. So the JDC contacted a small unknown company, airline company called Alaska Airlines. They had a very charismatic CEO called James Wooten. Before that, he was a CEO of a trucking company in Indiana. And he had to compete with Pan Am, TWA, that took over ports after World War II with the growing tourism industry. But he knew he couldn't compete with them, so he decided to do charter. So the JDC chartered him to pick up Jews from Yemen to Israel. Most of the pilots didn't know even where Aden was, so they had to educate them. Okay, so in December 48, while Israel is still at war, they started, and you see here the man is half naked. That's how bad their situation was. They were sick, naked, nothing, a really bad condition. It was urgent to airlift them. But I'm still amazed at the devotion of Israel that is still going now, this tradition to take care of people no matter how hard the situation is, they'll make a way to help their people. And it lasted until November 50. And it was a very secretive campaign. I mean, the media didn't know about this. The pilots reported that they were shot at while flying over Egypt, and they had to keep a radio silence that they wouldn't be tracked. And now let's talk about the name, Operation. The Israeli government gave it Operation Magic Carpet, but the Yemenis, most of them have never seen an airplane, so they were scared to go on the airplane. So it's probably somebody, in one of the books they mentioned that one of the Alaska crew remembers those prophecies from the book of Exodus and the book of Isaiah that God is going to bring them on the wings of eagles. And one of the teams, one of the crews was a painter. So he painted overnight an eagle on the airplane, just to let them know this is the eagle from the prophecy, to convince them to go on the airplane. And here are two books of Dar Metzger wrote about her parents. He was Warren Metzger and Mary Ann. He was a pilot. She was a flight attendant. They actually got married in Asmara during the Operation Magic Carpet. And Elgin M. Long also wrote, he was a young navigator that participated. And I think he's still alive. You can find on YouTube some interviews with him. Now, Elgin's, he was in the Captain Larry Curry's team. They called the Iron Team because they managed to do 12 trips in 29 days and bring 1,800 people to Israel. That's amazing. But because they broke the laws of the FAA with how many hours a crew can be in the air, Alaska was fined and there was a halt to the operation. But then Israel and Alaska created a new charter company called Near East Air Transport.
Alaska Airlines.
And El Al together, to continue this. I mean, that's being creative, how to overcome obstacles. And another obstacle they had, aside from being shot at, the British, because of they had Arab world pressure of if what to help, how much, so they couldn't provide them oil. So the team had to fly from Israel to Israel, no fuel in Israel because the war. So they had to go to Cyprus to get some fuel there. But the British provided. There was a Royal British Air Force there that provided gas. Then, yeah, they gave them. And then they flew to Asmara, which was Italian, get some oil there, and then flew to Aden, take more people and fly. It was insane. Very crazy time. This is another pilot who took part of it, Sam Lewis. This is his logbook. This is later, it was in March, so there already was fuel in Israel. So you can see that they had Lida, that was Lod Airport in Israel, Asmara, Aden. He helped to smuggle weapons to Israel during the War of Independence. Yeah, American Jew. And I did a research for him, and I wrote this Wikipedia page. You can hear more, and there are links to some of the documentaries and mentioning some books. And I'm very grateful to his daughter who sent me all this, a copy of his logbook. The logbook is in his, the copy is in Wikipedia. He was the first chief pilot of El Al, but he took a leave of absence for a year to join Alaska to take part of Operation Magic Carpet. Secret revealed. So we have this heroic evacuation. I think it was the first civilian airlift, largest civilian airlift in the history. Of course, after that, there was a biggest airlift to bring Jews from Iraq. It was 120,000 people. This is only 50,000 people, but still big. Yeah. So here, their newspaper in Israel announced in November 50 about the end of the exile from Yemen. There were 430 flights, so they brought more than 50,000 people to Israel, which is amazing. I don't know how they did this. Actually, in Captain Curry team, they removed all the chairs and had people to bring more people, have them sit on the floor and could carry more people. And Shlomo Barer was a journalist who was at this press conference to reveal this Operation Magic Carpet. So he wrote a book and investigated about this. So if you want.
At the time?
Yeah, I think it was published in the early 50s. And I mentioned the book also in my notes. Yes. If you want to learn more, there is a Jewish Museum, Alaska Jewish Museum in Anchorage. They have a permanent exhibition about Operation Magic Carpet. I put the link in my notes also. And also Alaska Airline on their website, if you go to About Us, they have and I put the link also in my notes. Epilogue. This is my family from my dad's side that came from Yemen during Operation Magic Carpet. This is my grandfather, Shaul. My last name is from his, Ben-Shaul. This is my grandmother, Hannah. In 44, she was pregnant with my Aunt Rivka when she got news that her mother, Rivka, died in Aden while waiting to go to Israel. So she named my Aunt Rivka after her mother who died in Aden. My grandfather, they came to Israel in 49. He was wealthy. Not many people had the money to go to travel to Aden. So he went to the market and asked people to spread the rumors that he's going to take everyone who doesn't have money, orphans, widows, he'll take them, he'll pay. And he wasn't born wealthy. He was an orphan to a poor family. He was the youngest of 9, but he made his own money. And so he brought to Aden more than 200 people, orphans, widows, poor people, aside from his family. And the funny thing is that the Israeli government wanted to reimburse him for this, that he paid for all the transportation. And he said, it's my mitzvah. No one is going to take my mitzvah from me. The fun thing, one of the orphans he brought to Aden, his son married the daughter of my Aunt Sarah. So just one closure. This is my Uncle Nathan. He was the first mayor of our hometown in Israel. There is a street name after him. His name Nathan Shaul.
What town?
Rosh Ain, sorry. And he was the youngest ever mayor in Israel at the age of 26. And he was part of the city council until his last day, until he died. He served. This is my dad, the youngest, Shlomo. He served in the military. In Yemen, when he was born, they looked into astrology and they said, Huwa hakal dawla, meaning he's going to serve the country. And they how is it? Because they cannot even carry dagger. How can he serve the country? So when they came to Israel, he was at the yeshiva, but he realized that he wasn't going to be a great rabbi, so he joined the military, and he was there for 35 years. So that's the prophecy. So they called him Shlomo after King Shlomo to serve the country. That's how it ended. Now his cousin came to Israel in 35, and he was part of the POWs in Germany. Yeah. My grandfather had, remember Dr. Olga Feinberg, who ran Hashed camp. When she came to Israel, she started, there were several absorption centers for refugees. One is Rosh Ain, where my family came. There was another one in Kibbutz and Shemer. My mother was born there. And she established an elderly hospital for Yemenis to take care of the people who didn't have family. And she trained young Yemeni women who knew the language as nurses. So the eldest sister of my grandfather, she was unmarried, an older lady with no children. She was there until she died. She was taken care of by Dr. Feinberg team. So last thing, this is the one of my cousins found. That's a document of the entry of my family to Israel. Thank you. So, thank you.